Start recording and ensure that we are recording. Yep, looks like we are. So hello and welcome to the October 19th edition of the SIG CLI Bi-Weekly meeting. My name is Sean Sullivan and I will be your host today. And we're going to get right into the announcements. So there aren't many announcements that are at least on the agenda. Number one is let us please remember that we have the code freeze coming up in about 4 weeks in early November. Maybe it's 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, November 9th on a Wednesday. And then also very excitingly, we are going to have KubeCon North America next week in Detroit for the entire week, October 24th through the 28th. That was all I could think of to add to the announcements. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to add? Okay, so why don't we move on to introductions. This is the time of the meeting where we all get to meet our colleagues. And so if you're new to the group or if you haven't been here for a while and you'd like to meet your SIG CLI colleagues, please introduce yourself. And if you don't want to, then that's fine as well. Is there anybody who'd like to introduce themselves today? Okay, why don't we move on to the topics then? And the first topic is a topic that I'm going to present, and maybe I'll get a little help from Alex and Antoine if they're here. But basically, there's been some movement on the kubectl apply prune, and there are 2 documents that I would like to introduce to the SIG, which have to do with kubectl apply prune. And the first is a document describing basically why prune is, what the problems are with the current implementation of prune. What is the current implementation and what are those limitations? And I'll just go ahead and open that document, and I'm not going to dig too deep into this, but you could see in the table of contents, it describes what prune is, what the implementation is, and then what are those limitations for the current implementation. And if we decide as a SIG that we would like to fix prune, then this next document is 3 particular approaches which have been discussed at length before in and out of the SIG that I've kind of put an overview for those 3 approaches. And mostly these aren't meant to be complete. It's not meant to be a complete design doc. All it is meant to give context to the rest of the SIG on this particular topic. So like I said, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I just want to make sure that the SIG, that you all have the information you need so that we can have discussions on how we move forward with kubectl apply prune. And with that, I'm going to ask if Katrina would like to, if she'd like to say a few words, because she has a lot of context on this issue and also a passion for it. Katrina, would you like to say anything about apply prune?
Sure. Yeah, this is a really, really old alpha, as I'm sure that your document mentions. And it hasn't progressed for a wide variety of reasons related to its implementation and the confusion that it causes as well. It's also a very dangerous command, but a very useful one that sort of allows folks to treat a whole set of documents the same way they would treat fields when they use apply. Because often when you are creating a set of resources, you are managing them as a set and you're applying them as a set. So being able to say, like, this is exactly what I want to have in my namespace or label delimiter limited subset of that namespace can be really useful if you manage to use pruning safely, which is hard. So I think my opinion on this is that we have had this in there for so long, and I believe that we've agreed to this at a previous SIG meeting, that we can't just get rid of it, like treat it like a normal alpha and just delete it one day to the next or anything like that. It's been in, I forget since what version, but an extremely early version. So there are lots of people at this point who likely rely on it. In fact, we have at previous SIG meetings decided that we can't even make behavior changes without a deprecation process that normally wouldn't apply to an alpha. So yeah, that's something that to keep in mind when we're discussing this topic, that we actually need to treat it like it's more evolved than alpha normally is. So yeah, and I maintain a tool for my company that actually uses this under the hood in a constrained way to make it safe. So even from that personal perspective, I do think this is a valuable feature that's worth evolving, though I totally agree about the limitations described.
Okay, great. And it sounds like there's going to be a very good contingent of the SIG CLI present at KubeCon next week, and so I'm hoping that we can have some substantive discussions and make some progress on that. What do you think, Katrina? Do you think that's appropriate forum?
Do we have a particular session in mind for that? Like, did we get time at?
I was thinking just ad hoc discussions. What do you think we should have a formal kind of get together for SIG CLIers?
Well, if the goal is to make progress on a specific issue, then I think, yeah, we should solicit feedback on who is interested in participating, and then make sure that they all have the opportunity to be there, which could also mean that we can't do it at KubeCon because the folks who are most passionate about this aren't there, for example.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to the next topic, which was brought up at the it was added to the agenda after we came across this issue again at our bug scrub. And so this is that get all is not all. And let me bring up the issue. Is the issue visible?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so this actually, it was closed as Eddie pointed out. It's mentioned in our docs that this particular item is it's legacy, it's hard coded, and we brought it up, I think, to the SIG to say, what should we do to make this less confusing? And I see Eddie is here. Eddie, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that we need to add a warning about.
Okay.
How we do that, I think, can still be up in the air if we figure out how to do it a one-time warning or warn every time until people suppress it. But yeah, I think it's come up enough that it's one of those things that we should warn about and make sure people know.
Okay. Okay, so, and we already have the a mention of adding a warning.
Yeah, and I think Tim opened an issue too.
Okay. Okay, was there anything else, Eddie, that we wanted to, besides adding the warning? Should we be able to move on to the next topic?
Yeah, unless, does anyone object to adding a warning? I think no one.
You mean like when you actually run the command?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be noisy, so we need to figure out, like you said, how that would actually work. But yeah, or even I think we talked about this last time, and I suggested, like, because this is always outputting a subset, even it outputs a section for each resource type that it actually found. But typically you might not even have all of the kinds that it looked for. So we could have a message that says something like, did not find any, replica sets or replication controllers, did not look at other resource types or something like that.
So
that would be useful.
Expanding the output for each section that's part of the category.
Yeah, or even just like at the end, sort of warning style, but like a message that would be also useful to folks who know that it's not everything, to say like, we didn't find explicitly any of these other things that we were looking for, which makes it more clear, like so that folks maybe they know it's not everything, but they forget what it is. Maybe that would also help them too. I'm just trying to think of how to make a message that we would repeatedly output to be more useful.
Is there an endpoint for get everything that's in a category? I'll have to look at how that's implemented.
That's a good question.
So usually all of the queries are by the GVK, and so all will, I think, issues multiple queries with empty label to list particular GVKs. And the GVKs are the ones that are within the all category, or have the all category. How does that work, Brian? I know you recently worked with.
Yeah, it's just a category on the resource that optional category, and some of them happen to have a category called all. And okay. It's kind of really one thing that occurs to me while we're talking about this is that kubectl get can do two things. It can get an individual resource or a category, and maybe we shouldn't mix those things together, and we should say you should use the -- category flag or something on kubectl get if you want the category. And then that way, if they do kubectl get all, we can warn them and say, hey, this is the deprecated way of getting categories. You should use the -- category or something like that. And I wonder if people realized that they were really requesting a category and not something that the system knows as being all resources, then that would make it a little more clear to people, I think, and clear up the confusion.
Yeah, is there a way to like output what is in a category from kubectl? I forget.
There was just a PR merge. Yeah, there's now. So okay. In API resources, you can see the category column now in the next release, upcoming release.
So we're guessing then that this maybe pulls from the discovery information. We don't know if there's an actual endpoint for categories.
Sounds like, yeah, it's probably coming from API resources, which makes sense.
Katrina, what do you think about Brian's suggestion for the way to fetch a category specifically, making that explicit?
Honestly, that would be a breaking change, and those are really difficult and slow to make. So I think the warning might be the more tractable approach. Because they're like, it's not only the all category also, right? It's also user-defined categories. Like I know my companies use that, and that is more convenient to use in the current syntax.
But it does have the advantage of being far more explicit. So the confusion is like the issue says, all is not all. And as Brian mentions, most people who are getting all don't realize that they're actually getting categories.
Right, but the other issue is that
and by making it explicit, I think it would remove a lot of the confusion, as Brian said.
Would it be kubectl get -- category, like with no resource at all in that case?
Yes.
So we're like changing that there's a required argument there.
Well, the required argument was, no, you're right. Yeah, no, you're right.
It just feels like a pretty big change to alleviate the confusion specifically for one subset of the usage.
Okay, so we'll move
Okay,
towards
so-
the warning, and we can talk more about how to do the warnings later.
Okay, so there's consensus. I'm just going to put consensus for the warning.
We can't just change the name, right? To make it clear that it's not all right, I assume, is why we're even talking about all these other things.
No, unfortunately, we are so bound when it comes to breaking changes sometimes.
Yeah.
And for good reason.
Almost every.
Yeah. I did find in our builder, we have a category expander function. So it looks like that's probably done through the discovery information. So I'll keep digging there.
And we can't just add everything to the all category.
I think that was pitched at one time, and yeah, I don't think we want to.
Okay.
Certainly adding it to the docs should be pretty straightforward and valuable. Folks read the kubectl doc or the Kubernetes docs more than they read our docs.
Maybe even a blog post to raise the visibility of this, so we don't get as many of these issues every single bug script. Okay, if we're agreed, we could move on to the next topic. Does that sound okay? Okay. So Marley, would you like to introduce this next topic?
Yes, I have done some work with the JSON path library that's maintained in tree for us, and it's come up a couple of times in issues. Just like it doesn't really fully implement the spec, which is understandable. Most of the changes, or most of the implementation, was done like more than 5 years ago. And I was curious if anybody cared enough to make it worth like trying to make it more in line with the JSON path spec. Because I was considering tackling that, but what is the context of this JSON path? So kubectl uses JSON path for a couple of things. Probably the most common thing is printers, like deciding what values get printed out and things like that. Whenever you get a resource or something, you can like dig down into like specifically just what you want to print out. I personally have mostly been working on it in the context of the kubectl config set command, and making it possible for people to use JSON path to access just like any key in the kubeconfig file. That in particular has led me to make some updates to the JSON path module that we have. And, you know, looking at it, I'm like, this is going to suck to do. Like, this is going to be a really hard problem, basically. And so I just, before I dug into all of that, I wanted to see if I don't know, if there's any political will, basically, within the SIG for that.
There is an old KEP that I just dug up, which I didn't know about until I just searched for it. Looks like it was closed.
Yeah. I have not seen this either. But yeah, I was going to make a KEP for, because this is probably going to be a pretty long running effort.
Yeah, if David Eads is the one who closed this, David knows all about the dragons that lie in that code. from the last time you worked on this. So you could always just reach out to David and see if, you know, he would chat or give any information about that.
Okay. And I assume that there's no active will against just using an external dependency to import like JSON path support, because that's generally the opinion from what I understand.
I would be for it because we get lots of issues like this all the time about functions and features that are missing. So
yeah. I looked around at one point and there just aren't a whole lot of libraries that I found that do JSON path implementation, but there are a couple, and I can see we'll have to like front them all so that this doesn't become like a huge breaking change, obviously, but yeah. Okay. I'll probably start there because then I don't have to do a bunch of like weird string parsing and algorithm writing. If I can avoid having to do that, that would be nice.
I think you're going to hear a lot of opinions on what particular flavor of JSON path everybody's would want to go to.
Yeah, that is the problem.
And you're also going to hear how you should use JQ if you want to do something specific. I think what I've heard a lot of, I remember talking about this in the past, but a very long time ago. I think people in general have been of the opinion that if you're trying to do something complicated, you should use JQ, because why would we re-implement JQ in kubectl?
yeah, that has historically been our response to all of those issues.
Yeah.
At the same time, I have empathy for people who are, you know, they think it looks like it looks like JSON path. We say it's JSON path, but no, it's the special subset of JSON path that they have to then go learn. Like it's not very empathetic of us to just say like, well, they have to go learn it because we don't want to.
Because we're lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a matter of laziness. Like that's a hard problem to solve. But yeah, so the last person that brought up the issue, actually, so they mentioned that they just didn't want to install JQ in their CI/CD pipeline, which I'm generally of the opinion of too. I don't like installing extra crap in my CI/CD pipeline. And so that's kind of like where I'm thinking of it, basically. I don't know. If I can find a way to do this without it being like horrible, then that would be great. And it is really frustrating that you can't just use like the way that this person was talking about using these things. I did end up finding out a way to just do it using bash variables, and but yeah, it's not ideal.
I don't understand what's challenging about this project.
Writing your own JSON path implementation would be
okay. Yeah.
hard.
There's no existing good implementation online.
I just need to go through the ones that I found the first time I was looking for this, and just double check and make sure that I'm not forgetting ones that were worth pulling in. But I hadn't thought about it until I started talking just now, that using external dependencies was probably okay if it was like actually worth using the external dependency, not using it just to use it.
I also think that each thing that uses JSON path might use its own sub implementation or tiny subset. I don't think they're all using a shared library. I think the last time I looked at it, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
I think
there's.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think there might be an example of bringing in an external version of JSON path, I think YQ, as a library in the CLI utils repository. I'll look this up, but my understanding was that someone brought in a different implementation of JSON path in the CLI utils repository.
Sorry, Brian. Okay, yeah, that would be good. As for different parts of kubectl using like different-ish implementations, yeah, that's I wouldn't say it's like different exactly. They all call the JSON path library that we have, but they just do different things with it. And so, like, for example, what I did for config set is not really the same as what gets used for the printer's consumption of it, because I'm just like ignoring most things that it provides because we just don't need it for config set, because all you're doing is looking up a value and setting it, and maybe potentially, I can't even imagine a use for this exactly, but like looking up a bunch of different values and setting them that way. Yeah, I think, and the printers are kind of doing the same thing if I remember correctly. But we're all like calling the JSON path library the same way. We're just like doing different things with it.
So Marley, did you get enough information to make some progress on this?
Yeah. So I'll start by looking to see if there's some external dependency that we can pull in that's worth pulling in, and figuring out a way to wrap it so that it's not like a breaking change. Because if it's going to be a breaking change, it's going to be impossible because it's used in so many different places. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
So there was another topic that got removed.
Yeah, I pushed it up to the top because Brian had to leave.
Oh, bummer. Sorry about that, Brian. Okay, so the stand-up, I guess, will also be we'll have to get to that next time.
I think we can look at that one real quick. So Brian
Okay,
put
great.
out a survey for folks to look into and respond to for localization, something we've talked about a lot, and Brian's take on ownership of it. So it looks like there is a draft of questions here, and Brian is probably looking for some feedback on that draft.
Here's some draft questions.
They look pretty straightforward to me.
Okay.
So I probably wouldn't change anything, but if there's anything else we want to add.
Yeah, we've got 6 questions so far.
He
Okay,
asked
great.
a very important one last, which is good, which is, are you willing to help translate? Give us your email. I'll ping him to find out. He might be waiting for someone from SIG Contribx or marketing to help with this.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Glad to see that moving forward.
Should we have a stand-up on customize, Katrina, or or no?
I don't really have anything in particular to say. I guess we're looking at remaking the roadmap document, which we do annually. So if anyone has any input for that, you can let us know. I see Anna's here too. Anna, do you have anything you'd like to mention?
Nope, nothing in particular.
Yeah, so that's it for us.
Okay, well, it looks like we're not going to take the full allotment of an hour for this meeting. Before we sign off, is there anything anybody else would like to add? Okay, well, we appreciate your time. And for those of you going to KubeCon in person, we'll see you next week. And if you aren't going in person, maybe you could go virtually. It's going to be a really interesting conference. And the SIG CLI will be, we will actually have we'll be talking about the updates. We'll be giving an overview of what's going on in the SIG CLI. And while I'm at it, thanks a lot to Eddie for all of the effort he's done. He's basically done almost all of that presentation. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, see you in 2 weeks.